things cause changes in other physical things. So in that sense, the universe is causally closed. It's a physical system. There's nothing non-physical outside it coming in. What you're talking about, I mean, definitely, but maybe I'm talking about the phenomenology of a thought, but what the brain's doing cognitively in terms of the brain before. I mean, I agree, I've heard of that as well, you know, people can think and cause something. But the brain is causing that to happen. You know, I don't deny that. I don't deny that the brain is causing that person to be able to move the limb or whatever. I mean, there's something cognitively happening. I guess I'm talking about the phenomenology, which, and a lot of, I mean, certainly scientists and a lot of philosophers do believe in physicalism, and so they want to be able to say that when we have this complete picture of science, or as neuroscience progresses, we're going to be able to account for phenomenal consciousness within neuroscience. And then there are some philosophers who say, no, the methods of science won't get at this first-person experience.
But just again, but like the science, you go to America, 60% of the population are fundamentalist Christians. They have a belief system which is entirely outside the subject of science, and so the people. There are a lot of people who have beliefs that are there that are quite inconsistent with scientific structures, and there's no problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's only a problem so far as if you kind of think, I want to know the truth, and there's this one truth. And this picture that science gives us is in conflict with this kind of, you know, picture we have of some kind of transcendental realm. I mean, for me personally, I don't know how to reconcile those worldviews, because I think the science is really important and really good, okay? So I don't know how you reconcile them. I'm just a student. and all I'm saying is this is kind of the argument in analytical philosophy where you reach that crossroad.
It seems a bit behind the times, doesn't it?
No, this is a live argument. This is a live argument, and people like Daniel Dennett, who are physicalists, you know, kind of say these arguments don't work. You know, we have a physical universe. We are going to be able to, you know, his book Consciousness explained in the 80s, and he didn't explain consciousness.
He didn't explain anything at all.
Yeah, so,
sorry about that.
You know, so this is a live argument. This is happening now. You know, it's not, and people who are physicalists, which is a lot of philosophers, think, you know, at the moment, and you must know this, at the moment we can't explain phenomenal consciousness in terms of science. And there are people who think...
You can just drag in quantum mechanics and it explains everything.
Well, I can't do anything with quantum mechanics. So, I mean,
no, but you must know Wheeler.
Wheeler?
In Princeton, who talked about consciousness, you know.
Well, there are philosophers who talk about the wave function collapsing when you observe it, and thinking that consciousness plays a role in that. But once again, I'm a student.
Well, so am I. It's okay. There's also in the Big Bang Theory, there's one episode where well, we'll talk about that later.
Yeah,
Can I explain it a bit differently? Can I explain it a bit differently? Like when you go to the exercise to imagine being to a place where everyone... So I imagine being in my reclining chair at home, nicely and relaxed. And just for a few seconds, I was conscious of a different awareness in my legs, like the heaviness of my legs they felt lighter. And the pain is gone, but even now, after those few seconds of not experiencing that heaviness and stiffness in my legs, they feel better now. So you can, as scientists, will be able to measure that something changed in my brain but they can't measure what I experience.
Well, I think this is what's
So,
changed.
does that make sense?
Yeah,
So it's a different awareness within me, but it can't be measured.
Your body is not disconnected from your brain. Your brain, your whole body is part of your brain.
No, look, we'll talk about it after the break, because if I don't get,
Yes, we've got to get on.
I won't get through it.
Can I just say one thing? When I was working in palliative care, and I did it for quite a few years, I would follow the morphine trolley behind the morphine trolley, because I'm also a registered nurse, so we work together. Now, morphine is a drug which acts on the pain receptors, the blood-brain barrier in the brain, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So my aim was to increase the effect of the morphine by the use of imagery and visualisation and relaxation with these patients. I had about an 80% success rate with that. So they didn't have to ask for more morphine 4 hours later, because the morphine was working so well, because what they did was visualise all sorts of things, and streams of consciousness were going on with those people. Now, you've explained that as a scientist.
Easy.
Okay.
Because
Okay, no, look, I tell you what, we will, as it is, my watch is not working, I've got that up there. As it is, that's phenomenal. I'm not going to get this, I'm not going to get through this as it is. So I'll leap through, I'm going to talk more about my thesis now, okay, and I'll leap through the next bit. Okay, so what we have phenomenal consciousness. It has this qualitative aspect and this subjective aspect, and it's a problem for science. But there's numerous theories that have evolved to try and explain it, and some of them concentrate on this subjective aspect. So they think that consciousness has this necessary connection to subjectivity, and they're called subjectivity theories. I'm not going to go into them in detail, but they include higher order theories, self-representational theories, and acquaintance theories. And in higher order theories, I said you have a mental state. They think it's conscious because of a higher order state. Self-representationalism kind of sees the self as built into the conscious mental state, as a kind of implicit subjectivity, and acquaintance theories are a bit weird. No one understands them. So don't worry about them. But anyway, my thesis was based a lot on a paper by these two guys called Billen and Kriegel. And they came across a discovery that Carl Jaspers, with a J like Jung, made. Now Jaspers, he found that thought insertion seemed to challenge these theories that connect consciousness with subjectivity. Jaspers was publishing around the time of Jung's early work, so his major psychiatric work was published in 1913, and he was a psychiatrist before he became a philosopher. And when he worked in psych wards with psychiatric patients, particularly patients with schizophrenia, he found symptoms like thought insertion that seemed to challenge this link between consciousness and subjectivity. So that's just a quote that he took from a patient, which is, I'm going to skip it. Okay, I've never read nor heard of them. They come unasked. I do not dare to think I'm their source, but I'm happy to know them without thinking of them. They come at any moment like a gift, and I do not dare to impart them as if they were my own. So the way to think of this is, if you say you're conscious of a thought, you seem to be saying, I'm conscious, I'm subjectively experiencing this thought. But if you say I'm conscious of a thought and it's not mine, you seem to be saying you're having a thought that's lacking subjectivity. Okay, this will be a bit more grounded in a minute. I'll go through this quickly. These guys, Billen and Kriegel, have two arguments because they want to say consciousness and subjectivity are connected while taking patients' reports seriously. I look at their arguments, I agree with their conclusion, but say that their reasoning is flawed. So the upshot, to wrap that up quickly, is that consciousness and subjectivity, that claim is not challenged by a thought insertion because these thoughts are subjective in the same way as normal thoughts are. You know, these subjectivity theories say that a conscious state is conscious or subjective if a person is in some way aware of being in that state. Okay, so I'll get it grounded. Okay, so inserted thoughts are subjective in the same way as normal thoughts. They don't challenge this claim that consciousness and subjectivity are connected. So we have a problem. These are the inserted thoughts and these are the normal thoughts. What's the difference between them? There must be some kind of difference. If patients are saying these thoughts are inserted, you know, these thoughts are not my own, they're caused by someone else, and these are my own thoughts. Billen and Kriegel kind of say, well, these thoughts are different because they feel inserted. Okay, and I say that's not very explanatory. It just kind of labels the problem. So I give 3 reasons why these inserted thoughts are different to normal thoughts. And these are spatial location, I'll go into these in a moment, perceptual phenomenology, which I'll explain, and cognitive phenomenology, which I won't explain, okay? Because it's complex and my supervisor thought it was a bit dodgy. I think it's a really good idea, but I do. Okay, so what do I mean by spatial location? Now, in that quote at the beginning of the talk, I said those God thoughts were on the right side of my brain and my thoughts were on the left, and I've had inserted thoughts that feel more localized and condensed than normal thoughts. Okay, so I'm not talking about the brain, what the neurons are doing, where they're firing. I'm talking about where we experience the thoughts. So everyone shut your eyes again and think something to yourself, like say your name over and over again, and see if you have a sense of a spatial location. Okay, well, I have a sense with my normal thinking that it's quite diffuse and subtle and spread throughout the area of my skull. Does anyone have, just quickly, any experience of any location of their thoughts?
You can actually shift it if you just practice, like certain Eastern philosophies would more say in your belly or your heart, and
Yeah.
therefore they might be used to sensing it from down there. In the West we tend to think it is here.
Yeah, definitely.
But I sometimes practice with thinking it, and it seems natural then for it to be there. But normally, like most Westerners, I do think it's probably just in my skull.
If you're hearing language, which is kind of what I'm getting at now, I'm kind of getting at kind of hearing an inner narrative. I think an inner narrative is generally up here. But look, I'll just say quickly, perceptual phenomenology is kind of like that first person sound, and I think it's normally very subtle and diffuse, and whereas I've had inserted thoughts that sound louder and clearer and like recordings going off, whereas normal thoughts, it's not as sharp as when someone's talking to you directly. It's kind of a bit more, okay. Now, having said that, I had 2 academics mark my thesis. They both questioned whether thoughts had a location. For them, they didn't. I think that's mad, because I think if I'm here thinking and I move over here, my thoughts don't stay there. I can hear, you know. So in that sense, I think thoughts have a spatial location. But it's not accepted by it. That claim is not accepted by everyone. You know,
it's a major part of sport, that mind-muscle connection. You place your mind into the muscle that you are seeking to activate, for example, in weightlifting.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about, like if you're doing a relaxation, you know, before you meditate and you relax parts of the body, or...
That's right.
Yeah.
So the Indian concept of prana is the idea of universal mind that becomes present as a spiritual energy.
I guess for my purposes, I'm talking about these inserted thoughts. So what I'm saying is, you have a patient with schizophrenia, like me, who experiences inserted thoughts. Now, I'm saying they're different to normal thoughts. For example, when I'm unwell, I'm not unwell, okay? Why am I saying those thoughts are different to normal thoughts? And I'm trying to give these two very concrete reasons, phenomenological reasons. You know, not like, there's stuff in the literature, like they're not endorsed, or, you know, they're like I said, they feel inserted. You know, I'm saying, well, maybe there are these solid reasons why these thoughts are different, like the spatial location feels different. Somehow the location or the sound of them, okay?
A good question, just to just formalize a little bit. When you talk about thoughts, I start to get impressions that I hear a voice,
Yeah.
or the thought it's like voiceless, or it's a voice.
I mean, people will say you can think without words, and certainly you do, because my cat is thinking when it's going to steal the other cat's food, you know, and should I do that? It's not thinking in language. So certainly there are thoughts without language, but I guess for my purposes, I'm saying that in thought insertion, we're talking, and some first-person experiences of thought insertion explain it as images flashing on the screen, okay? But I'm saying yes, that inner narrative, and we may not have it all the time, but we do. Most of us experience at times our thinking as an inner voice, a subtle kind of inner dialogue or monologue, and so that's the voice I'm kind of trying to tap into. But people have different experiences. There's some people are more visual and maybe don't have a sense of that voice, or some people it's very loud. For me, it's very loud, you know. But I think there are different experiences. They say some people can't visualise. I find it. Am I over talking? Did that answer your question, or?
It's answering the question. I see that it's quite diffuse field in general. Would be interesting to formalize a little bit, just for sake of science, because it's very difficult to understand what is the difference, just because of the density of experience that you're getting from your own thoughts and inserted thoughts. But for example, quite often I have very different levels of thoughts, and they can come from any direction. It's quite loud, but I don't think that it's inserted, or it's really mind or not mind voice. I never really focused on this part as differentiate my thinking machine as is my thought and not my thought. And I start to be a little bit confused how people really can distinguish two things.
Okay, I mean, I would say this, what I'm talking about is a symptom, and and so a lot of us, I think, experience maybe, look, I don't know is the answer. You know, I'm trying to explain a symptom, and I think we do think to ourselves in different ways, but this is something that is, firstly, perhaps distressing for people, and maybe people, like you're saying, I think you're saying, I'm not sure, you're saying different parts of yourself have those, you know, there are thoughts from, that are from different parts of yourself.
But I don't, just different parts, they could be even just outside, as I feel it, but I am not considering those the inserted ones. It's just a part of the thinking machine.
Yeah.
Or my connection with the world, probably.
Well, the inserted thoughts are a symptom in schizophrenia. So it's a specific thing. Like when you have these thoughts, you have a sense that they're your thoughts, don't you?
Not always.
But you don't. Yeah.
It's quite often I have a thought that I can't track logically. You know, sometimes comes some kind of elimination with an answer, and very strong one. But it doesn't mean that it's not my thought. or I can overly speculate that it's a voice of God. Well, I'm not in a position to claim this determination. But I think that is quite normal, but from my point of view, I never really tried to keep them like it's mine, not mine. There's always, for me, like a more holistic process.
Well, this is I'm going to run out of time, so I'm going to answer this very quickly. The rest of my talk goes into psychological problems. I look at a model of consciousness that says consciousness is in a global state. I argue there are two global states, the inserted thoughts in one and the other. I use patients that have the corpus callosum, that band in the, you know, I use these empirical studies to provide evidence that you have two global states. And I say this extra global state is why you have that spatial location is different and why the sound is different. Okay, that's my thesis. But I'm running out of time and I've explained that. No. Then I tie it into Jung. And with Jung, what we have are complexes. So Jung has the conscious and the unconscious. And we have, in the unconscious, we have the shadow, the anima, the animus, the collective unconscious. But he also, he has complexes, which are these splinter psyche that behave like independent beings, right? So you have the conscious, in the unconscious you'll have these complexes. And at the heart of a complex is an archetype. And an archetype is something unknowable, but it kind of pops up in behaviour and it follows patterns, universal patterns like birth, death, marriage or whatever. Okay. Now, what I was going to say, in analytical philosophy that I study, I can't use, no one would supervise me doing Jung, okay? So I have to use split brain patients, and these are really interesting things like dissociative identity disorder, like, which it used to be called multiple personality disorder, and thought insertion and hearing voices. These are really interesting cases where we seem to have a breakdown of the unity of consciousness. And in these split brain cases, you seem to have two agents in the one person. Now, Jung was saying all this stuff. He was saying, you know, you have complexes that are independent psyches split off. And, you know, maybe some of this material comes into consciousness and in these symptoms. But what you're explaining sounds like a normal experience of it, whereas I'm not trivializing symptoms like thought insertion. They can be very distressing. Okay, so I don't want to say it's normal, but I also want to say that I think this was pointed at by Jung, is that we have parts of the personality that are cut off from our normal ego. You know, who we know ourselves to be normally, and we have bits, you know, that pop up in our behaviour that other people can see and we can't see, and maybe you know, if I'm sitting here and I'm psychotic and I have the voice of God on one side of my brain and my other thoughts on the other, it seems to be coming from a part of my personality that I'm not in touch with consciously at all. And these were the sort of things I think Jung was grappling with. But the way science is now, and analytical philosophy, which leans on science, you know, you can't use these arguments. You've got to ground it in, you know, things that are verified by science and what have you. And that, I think it's 9 o'clock, so I think we'll have a break. Thank you.